Welcome back. It's been a whole week since, but what coming back to me is Maya Contreras. We're talking about democratic politics, and one of the interesting things I think that came up through all of this, through the primary debates, is this term of a DSA conducting a hostile takeover of the party. And I've spoken about this, written about this. Zora Mandami had a great way of describing it as, well, a party is your voters, right? Like, how could it be a hostile takeover? Because in corporate terms, that just means that people are against the wishes of the corporation. They're stealing, they're taking the ownership of it. And here it's just like, no, like the shareholders are choosing a new direction. How is that necessarily a bad thing? And I want to along those lines, I want to first start off with something from, I'm sure no friend of yours, Rahm Emmanuel, because a lot of people have been doing this, and I call it sort of, again, weaponizing race, and particularly Black people, and even legitimate fears that Black people have. So I'm going to read something from him. Putting my DCCC political strategist hat back on for a minute, the DSA versus Normie Dim debate is overlooking an important fact. Black Democratic turnout has been surging since the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act and cleared the way for the Trump-backed redistricting wave. Louisiana, South Carolina, Alabama, Michigan, and Tennessee. When voting is not a luxury and your rights are on the line, politics stops being an Ivy League seminar, and there's no patience for faculty lounge debate. It's existential, and the national media would do well to see there's more than one story coming out of these primaries. First off, I can't help but think he's calling me dumb. Like, we don't, like, we're too busy working in the, you and me, Maya, we're too busy in the field. I don't have time for this faculty. What you talk? I don't have time to think about this academic stuff. Like, I gotta like just,
Yeah.
it's like some song on the South shit. Please.
Yeah. Yeah. Rom. Oh God. This is so, he is such a strange human being to me because he has been rejected over and over again by people, and yet he's still trying to like insert himself into 2028. Like, you could tell he wants to run. He has no idea how to discuss, he has no idea how to discuss Black voters at all. I will use a younger word, that he is definitely cringe. And to me, it is ridiculous that he would say anything like that. He has no idea. I mean, I saw that he did an interview on Morning Joe where he said he had a conversation with Mom Donnie. I don't know if you heard that. Did you
Yeah.
hear that? Where he said, I am my father's father and you are your father's father, to try to talk about for his defense of Israel. And one, I don't think Mom Donnie's has said his side of what happened, but Rom is somebody who is still living, I think, I don't even say 2015. I think he's still living in like 1992. His politics is so old fashioned. He is not talking about the ways in which this country is wanting to move. Now, yes, I believe that a lot of this country is pretty conservative, but there are lots of people who consider themselves to be conservative that are seeing that things are broken. And this is why in New York City, everybody thinks that New York City is this liberal blue bastion. There are lots of conservatives that live in New York
No.
City. I live just like a half a mile from Wall Street. Like that's where they all are. But what appealed to them about Mom Donnie was that he was really talking about pretty standard stuff. Rent control. Like, our rents go up and up and up and up in New York City all the time. That was something that was really appealing, making the subways work faster, on and on. But affordability within groceries, that was a huge important thing. There are lots of people in this country that are like, I want that. I want that's happening in New York to happen in my city too, and they want to elect their own type of Mamdani. DSA across the United States has elected a lot of people in local and state positions. So this idea that it's just this East Coast or West Coast thing is not true at all. Rahm Emanuel has zero clue what's going on because he's in his own bubble. My husband and I were traveling. We just traveled from New York City to Chicago, and we went through Pennsylvania, we went through Indiana, we went through Ohio, and we were filling up our gas tank in Ohio. And we were next to a guy who was definitely a Trump voter based on the type of stickers he had, like a back the blue sticker. And the gas was going really slow. My husband was like, "What's going on?" And the guy inserted himself in our conversation. He goes, "Yeah, we're running out of gas." I was just like, "Oh yeah?" And he goes, "Yeah, there's not enough gas. That's why it's going really slow." He was really upset. He was upset about the gas prices. He's upset about this. And my husband and I were just like staring at each other like, does he realize why the gas prices are so high and why the gas price? But I think that he did. There were a lot of people you could tell that were kind of getting fed up, and they are looking for something that isn't just this moderate position of like, let's kind of keep things the same, right? They are looking for bigger change. It's why a lot of people went to Trump, because he lied to them and said he was going to make a lot of change happen. And in New York City, we have a mayor that didn't lie to us, and we're seeing tangible changes happening. So that's why this idea of like Rahm Emanuel saying we need to get rid of DSA and move back to the middle, I'm like, bro, that's just not the reality of what's happening right now. And to bring it back to Hong, it's been a week. Um, she still got over 310,000 votes. That is massive for a DSA candidate. That is an earth-shattering amount of votes. So people have to recognize that no matter how they're feeling about leftists or progressives or radicals or Marxists or whatever, there is a sea change they're having. And I'll say one last thing about this. Trump is now moving away from the word socialist because socialist is not the big boogeyman word that it had been in the past. He's now moving it towards communism again. He's always used communism and socialism interchangeably, but now he's trying to test the waters on communism more, hoping that will scare people because people are starting to be like, do you mean like social programs? Is that part of socialism? Like, do you mean like social, like in Europe? So people are starting to not be as scared of that kind of terminology. So I'll say that.
Uh, yeah, and I know, and again, it's frustrating to me when Black people are, I would say, being used as a monolith from people like Rahm Emanuel or any sort of centrist white person to argue that Black people are these sensible. And some of that came up because of 2020, because of 2016, which is in a vacuum. It's just, choosing Hillary Clinton or Biden over Sanders does not mean that all Black people are going to come in and rescue the party from socialism, which is often how it's framed. I mean, I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina. The first political event I recall going to when I was 10 was for Jesse Jackson in the park. And I remember like the support for him, and he was very far left. He was
Yeah.
a populist, and
The
then
Rainbow
obviously,
Coalition.
yeah, and the support for Obama, and so the politics are much more complicated than that. But I feel like that's been because we sort of can't get past 2016. We keep sort of fighting this war. Another white expert of Black people, Michael LaRosa, the former chief of staff for Joe Biden, who immediately after Abdul El-Sayed won the Michigan Senate primary, he endorsed Mike Rogers, the MAGA enabling Republican, and he said on Laura Ingraham, which is where you want to go if you want to reach Black people, he said Black voters know better. It may take this, so the loss and potential general election loss in Michigan and then Wisconsin, for my party to learn what normal is. And then Ingram's like, they're going to have to learn to be beaten badly to learn it's not an agreement. So, Republicans obviously, clearly some obviously racist policies or whatever, but they were never people there's no Republican who came out like Reagan never said, man, we rely too much on these hillbillies to get elected.
Yeah.
Man, we need to do something to sort of, because obviously real Americans are the ones in the cities making money. Like he might have said that in private. He would never say that in public. He would never and there's this whole thing because even the Falcony Lounge argument, again, all right, look, if you want to say there's a challenge with we are not doing as well in rural areas or amongst non-college educated people, that's fine. But beating up on the coalition you have, where is the sense in that? So like Alyssa Slotkin's whole thing of just the, it doesn't, it can't just be the coast. We have to get through the middle. Can you imagine like JD Vance or Ted Cruz saying that about, look, we just can't, and obviously these people are barely read and look at them and whatever. We need to try to expand and get out, the real Americas or someplace else. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what, how do you, and it's not only to me insulting, but it's
Mm-hmm.
just it's counterproductive. Like, how does that work by constantly saying that your voters are not true Americans?
Well, obviously, it's incredibly condescending and also patronizing. And I'll also say that when I talk about anti-blackness, I always talk about it across the political spectrum. And we know how anti-blackness presents itself on the right. It's very clear, right? They use black people as shields, boosting a candidate like Herschel Walker, who was zero qualified to do it. But they use it as a shield against accusations against racism and to get what they want. And then obviously their policies are anti-black and like throwing people off their voting rolls and voter suppression. Well, there's anti-blackness in the middle. Now, so I mean, it's so deeply entrenched within moderate and centrist circles that they're just not even seeing it. They are saying things that are so anti-black, but they don't think they're like, what I love black. We love black voters. I'm like, yeah, the way that you take black voters for granted is absolutely disgusting, and the way you talk about it is disgusting. And then on the left, yes, in some circles on the left, there is anti-blackness as well, like especially when someone is just like, we're going to just discuss class without discussing how identity impacts economics or class, right? And things like that. And then there's just sometimes just full on like a reduction of like how black voters vote, right? So there'll be some people on the left that are like, I can't believe they voted for these, establishment candidates. That's disgusting, right? Which is completely anti-black as well. What people still don't recognize in this country is that the black community is not monolithic by any means. We have a proud tradition of radicals and black Marxists and black leftists in this country, and we have a lot of voters who are moderate and who are liberals and who are progressives. They are across, and there are conservative black voters. They are across the political spectrum. And for those that are center left to the far left, a lot of black voters, especially within my family, they don't want empty promises. And one of the reasons why Bernie Sanders didn't do really well with black voters is because they didn't see a track record. This was like a little bit practical. They were just like, we don't see a track record for him. We don't see the history of it. And he didn't know how to engage with black voters. He did know how to engage with Latino voters, but I give a lot of credit to Chuck Roca for that, because he really helped him with his outreach. With black voters, he just assumed that he would kind of grab some, or worse, they were just out of his mind. They were out of his purview. So he didn't know how to do that. That has been different for candidates like Mamdani. I think where his misstep is that he didn't hire, I think, enough black leaders in positions of power, and he remedied that. He fixed that right away.
Mm-hmm.
El Sayed, he had black voters turn out for him. He's going to have to work harder to get more. But there's a lot of black voters in this country who have rightly said, these politicians never came through for me. Bill Clinton didn't come through for me. This didn't come through for me. This didn't come. So they keep seeing a track record of people on the left. They know that the right is against them. A lot of black voters. That's why the vast majority, like over 90% of black voters, vote for the Democratic Party, is because they know the Republican Party is mostly against them. Black men, for the first time, kind of started moving a little bit more over to the Republican Party because they started liking what they heard about like economics and business, and that's where the Democrats are dropping the ball. I said that to Kamala Harris's team. I did
Mm-hmm.
meet with them. I talked to them about Palestine. I talked to them about black ownership, and I was kind of like, you guys have to be better about talking about black small businesses. But I will say that we have to, if we're going to eradicate anti-blackness in this country, we can't just we can't allow people to say it's only on the left. The left is doing it, because then we're ignoring all of it in the middle, from things like Ron Emmanuel and all of these different people that are saying things about black voters that's patronizing, that's condescending. It needs to be rooted out. It needs to be rooted out of our party, full stop. So I'll say that. You had mentioned, like, we were going to talk about electability, and it's still, a word that I cannot stand. I actually hate the word electability because
I just find it very cynical
yes.
as how it's been used. Like, what does
Mm-hmm.
that mean? And especially
Mm-hmm.
in Michigan, it was just like, I don't know. Like, you're showing me, you keep saying this without, as you I've quoted you on this, showing the work. What happened with the with Biden, it was consistent of like, even to point where Joe Biden in 2019 was saying, well, you might like someone a little bit more, which is, I would hope my wife never says this about me. You might like someone a little bit more, but think about who can beat Trump. And I was that was one of the first signs of like, this is almost some sort of Animal Farm thing of like, oh no, Farmer Jones might come back. Like, you've got to
Mm-hmm.
like, maybe don't go for the candidate who and obviously Biden was losing some of those early states.
Yeah.
I and when they've talked about this, there's this narrative of like, oh well, the black voters saved the party from socialism, and I've pointed out many times that like, by don't there's no black candidate who thinks that they can ever repeat what Biden did. Biden was always, the benefit was that there was a presumption that he was going to win these Rust Belt states. If you had a candidate who's a woman of color, if AOC were to bomb predominantly white states and Nevada, and then even do well, but then do well with black
Mm-hmm.
voters, you would again have these same people freaking out. Lisa
Yeah.
Slotkin's like, oh, but there's no way she's going to lose. It'll be Harris all over again. So I think people are very, and you talked about show the work and not giving empty promises. I kind of have this with sometimes with sort of the center left argument of we can we can kind of go back to 2008. Trumpism never happened. Like, just let us get back in power and we'll work together again. I mean, I think David Crowley in Wisconsin had a very sort of, and look, I get doing the sort of Obama style messaging. Obama was great. That was one of our peaks of uh, of of optimism, right? In
Yeah.
2008, but like, I can work with well, work with Republicans. We don't have a monopoly of ideas. We can do bipartisanship. And it's like, I don't know. It feels like a lot of those guys are fascists and are bad. And like, when we tried that, everyone spat in Biden's face. And it was and that's what really frustrates me, because when Rahm Emanuel talked about what has been happening with voting rights, with black voting rights, I really got infuriated, because, I have the receipts, as you say, from centrist Democrats who in 2021 who complained, who said that Biden was focusing too much on voting rights, like he was
Mm-hmm.
wasting capital. You should
Yeah.
have been, you pass that infrastructure bill. This is like people like Gottheimer, Joshua whatever, say, pass that infrastructure bill. We got to work between the aisles. We don't want to pass partisan bills, because voting rights was seen as partisan.
Mm-hmm.
Manchin and Sinema were dismissing it as partisan. And so, like, well, you guys weren't necessarily on the front lines of preserving voting rights for black people that were being targeted
Mm-hmm.
clearly at the time. And so now you're suddenly bringing it up in this context, just seems very, very cynical to me.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I get like, I'm of the opinion of, I get like, maybe you don't agree with left wing policies, but I do think there has to be a sense of, you need to run as if Trump got reelected.
Yeah.
And this is the Republican Party we have now. This is certain aspects of governance doesn't work. And I think, where I get lost with Slotkin and even Josh Shapiro is this idea of like, here's how I'm going to run. I'm a get shit done Democrat, and I
Yeah.
go and I deliver for voters, and that's enough. And and I've seen this from the left and the far left, as far as like how we just do enough that will stop fascism. And I don't know how much I believe that.
No, and what's really sad is that because our massive conglomerated media now, which is just owned by like Sinclair and Nexstar, and we'll see what happens with the Ellisons, we only get these types of framing that focus on electability and personality, and we're not talking about things like voting rights. Because Biden should have grabbed Manchin and grabbed Cinema and said, look, you bastards, what do you want? Shut up. What do you want? You have to pass voting rights or else we're screwed. We have to codify it right now. And Biden is just, that's just not who he was. Biden wasn't living in 1992. Biden was living in 1982. So Biden was like still this idea. Biden is the establishment. Biden was invited into all the rooms. He was in the rooms. He could hug. He could hug whoever and be. Lindsay was my friend. You know, he could have done. It was all like that, right? So Biden did not see the urgency. And this is why, to me, these younger candidates, and listen, it has something to do with age. I'm sick of ageism. There are lots of progressive candidates that are older. I don't want to hear about ageism. But I'm saying, but some of the younger candidates that we have right now, they feel the urgency. We have Canada firefighters, we have Canadian firefighters, we have firefighters in France. We global warming is here. We have floods in New York all the time. And if we're not able to access the ballot box, and this is why I was a voting rights advocate forever. I still call myself a voting rights advocate, but why I was pushing that so hard for so long was I was like, if we do not have access to the ballot box, we cannot change this structure. I'm someone that firmly believes that we live on a system on the bones of white supremacy. White supremacy is in the concrete. It supports all the buildings that we're in. All the people who move into the white supremacist buildings have to compromise in a certain way, right? And this is why radicals and Marxists and leftists, a lot of them, especially black radicals, Marxists, want to build a new system as they take down this system. Not burn it down, take it down as something new is built. Because in the system that we have now, it is very hard to bend white supremacy. And white supremacy says, oh, we're not going to vote. We're not going to take care of voting rights right now. We'll do that later. And what happens? It affected Wisconsin. Hillary Clinton lost Wisconsin. It made sure that Tony Evers didn't have power for a long time. And it can snap its fingers like this and say, we're going to say that Hong is a ridiculous person. And this because all the infrastructure is there for that. And that's what people don't understand. While people are quibbling about, did Dr. El Said, is he a little too cocky? While they're saying stuff like that online, I'm like, bitches, they're still keeping Mitch McConnell alive. Like we don't know if like Mitch McConnell is alive. Like you have people are underestimating. I'm like, motherfuckers, you are underestimating what Republicans are willing to do, and all the infrastructure that has been built in this country. I'm talking about media infrastructure, financial infrastructure, institutional infrastructure, automatically benefits the right. And Democrats have to recognize that capitulating to them does not help us out. Saying you're going to work across the aisle with Nazis right now, because right now, I don't know anybody in the Republican Party. I don't know one person in the Republican Party right now that is saying we need to have voting rights. We need to have human rights. We need to have civil rights. Not one person. Now, I'm sure there is in a state house somewhere that's like, hey, I'm over here. And then I'm like, why are you still in the Republican Party? Right? So to me, it's like Democrats should be framing it this way. We're the party of human rights. We're the party of civil rights. We're the party of voting rights. We're the party of unions. You want to work with us? Then come over here. We're not crossing over to you to compromise. You cannot compromise on voting rights. You cannot compromise on civil rights. You cannot compromise on human rights. This is something the Democrats have to understand. And that to me is, when we talk about common sense, that's common good sense. It should not be this idea that we're compromising. You want to compromise on infrastructure? I guess if you want to pay a little less for that bridge, see how that works out for you. But to me, I'm like, why are we compromising on these things? So I really, really want moderate Democrats right now. One, I need them to understand, I want them to think to themselves, why are you a moderate? What are you moderate on? What are you saying you're moderate on? What is it? Because I don't know. Are you against fully funding public education? Are you moderate on that? Or maybe you're moderate about Wall Street. You think that should still exist. Okay. Then if you want it to still exist, then do you want to put a bunch of regulations on it? Because right now, the vast majority of Americans do not own stock. Like when Trump's like, the stock market's past 50K. It's like, who cares? The vast majority of us don't have a ton of stock in it. So to me, the Democratic Party needs to change its narratives around what it is that we are trying to do. And we don't have to agree on everything, but we need to basically, we need to just really agree on a few things that we're not going to compromise on civil rights, human rights, and voting rights. Period. End of
Mm.
story. And I just don't understand why it's so hard for think tanks like Third Way and all of that. I mean, because that's not how they make their money. They make their money from like being a centrist think
Well,
tanker.
they believe that you can, if you are a sort of sane Republican or sane moderate, like if you're you can then people will make the choice and that will keep out the fascists. And that's my most benign description of it, but it doesn't work. So people are looking at this as like it hasn't worked. Like Biden was president. So like if Sanders or Warren had been president before and had made it one term, very low approval rating, and Trump came back, okay, then like, all right, maybe we went too far, but no one can say, but there's a sense of like a lot of scapegoating. So I've seen it now that like, oh well, Biden listened too much to his staff of young liberals, and that's why things went poorly. And then these voters didn't show up, and there's a lot of I found horrible Islamophobic. You said you've spoken to the Harris campaign about Gaza, but like, and we're going to name again. You already did it before in the first the first hour of this, but um, so Fred Gutenberg, who's a gun rights activist, but pro-Israel, but also again, you can be pro-Israel and not a flaming Islamophobe as he is,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
he has been pushing this stab in the back narrative that Harris lost because of people who didn't vote for her because of Gaza. There's little evidence of that that
Mm-hmm.
hurt her, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not why she lost has Latino voters outright
Mm-hmm.
or most moderate. She won. She actually did better with self-identified liberals in Michigan than Biden had done, but she
Yeah.
did poorly with less well with moderates.
Yeah.
But they keep spinning this and the blame because they were trying to do this with uncommitted with Al Sayed, and it's just like you are the reason Trump is in office again to say that marginalized groups, so Muslims are why Trump is back is
Yeah.
just horrific.
Yeah.
And you know, Goldberg Gutenberg was like calling Rashida Tlaib a cancer, like using this most dehumanizing language.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is horrific and terrible. And on social media, Shannon Watts was like playing ignorant about it. It's like, oh, he wrote that. Like, yeah, he's a kind of prominent figure who's bashing an elected member of Congress. Maybe stop writing about Hassan Piker every day
Yeah.
and mention, especially because we talk about like what women get protected. Like she's a woman. Like it's often weird of like which you would almost forget, but they are they are women, both
Yeah.
her and Ilhan Omar, who gets just vicious screeds
Yeah.
from these men in the moderate men, and no one says anything.
So
Like, and it's very frustrating. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, of course. And where I'll give Fred grace is that obviously he lost his daughter in the shooting at in Florida, and so I think there's still a certain amount of trauma and PST. But I'm someone who has PTSD, and I doesn't make me an Islamophobe.
No.
So I will say that, but I will give him grace for his gun advocacy. But where he is not, what's tough about advocates like that is that they don't see how violence is interconnected. Gun violence is interconnected to anti-Semitism, into Islamophobia. All of that is violence. And he is not seeing the connection. So that's when I talk about Hassan Piker and Bernie Sanders stopping here when talking about a decolonial framework. Fred stops here. when he's talking about violence. He only thinks it's right here with gun violence. He doesn't see that his Islamophobia is violent. It's violent. And then I want to say this as far as going too far, where I'm sick and tired of liberals saying the left is going too far. I'm like, motherfuckers, the right has gone too far. I mean, are we not going to talk about that? They have gone too far in this country. It should not be acceptable to dictate whether or not we have bodily autonomy. It should not be acceptable to have transphobia, legalized transphobia, narratives that are transphobia. There should be none of that. And yet that there is this acceptable amount of bigotry that we have in this country that has gone too far. And a lot of this, especially within the podcast space of like red pilling and all of that, the amount of dripping misogyny that's incredibly violent has been acceptable under the guise of First Amendment, free speech. All of that has gone too far. So if some on the left, especially my favorite black radicals who are saying, when they're discussing prison abolition, and of course people don't understand what that means. They're like, they want to tear down the prisons tomorrow. And I'm like, have you read a prison abolition book? That's not what it says at all. It's talking about the fact that this country has spent billions of dollars, mostly now on private prisons where a few people get wealthy for over incarcerating black people. And we're talking about the fact that, solitary confinement is torture. So this is about starting to get rid of things like solitary confinement and making sure prisoners aren't eating foods with maggots, which has happened at some of the prisons here in New York City. So what we're talking about is human rights. And so to me, when people talk about, there was this theory, and I had to research it too, like 10 years ago, I said, oh, I guess horseshoe theory is correct. And the more that I research horseshoe theory, I'm like, oh, it's mostly been downplayed or debunked altogether by political scientists. So like horseshoe theory isn't actually a thing because they want two different things. If this person over here wants universal health care and this person wants women to not to be able to vote and to stay in the house, whatever, those aren't the same things. If this person over here is saying that we want to make sure that the environment is clean for our children, and this one says we want to be able to do dumping and pollution, those aren't the same things. And so they're not actually touching, they just are on far ends of the spectrum. So we have to stop thinking of it like that. What people don't understand is power. That's the difference. You can have a leftist that is so concerned by power that they just want to get into a position of power and rule with an iron fist, just like you can go on the right and have somebody that just wants to get into power and rule with an iron fist, right? So this is the danger. It's not necessarily left wing and right wing, although right wing is dangerous because of the type of policies they have. It has to do with power. And so that's what I want to focus on because, like, for example, Mamdani, who considers himself a democratic socialist, is not interested in power in that way. He is a public servant. Someone who is interested in power wouldn't be bicycling all around New York City. You know, he'd have a personal driver. You know, like Bloomberg thought he wouldn't be safe enough, so he was always like when he would ride the subways, he had like 30 security guys around him. You couldn't even see him. Like, so we have to be more focused on what that means. And so I will give one thing to the colonizers that founded this country, the colonizers that started this country. They did know about power. They were like, the monarchs that we were leaving are so concerned about power that we had to form a country that is not so focused on power. And that's why we have to have checks and balances. The Democratic Party right now could lead that conversation and say, we need to make sure that that we have to solidify checks and balances in this country. Right now, we should not have a guy that's falling asleep in the Oval Office, that is tearing down the White House to build a ballroom, that is bombing Iran and killing children and costing American taxpayers $1 billion a day because we allowed someone to grab that much power. We should never be allowed to do that again. So instead of focusing on Hassan Piker and like him just being kind of, this wealthy podcaster guy on the left, they should not be focused on him. They should be focused on the fact that there are people that want to seize power and stay in power forever. Don't think that JD Vance doesn't want that too.
No, no.
That's what JD Vance is, that's what he's hoping to do right now. That's also what, and by the way, that's what Gavin Newsom's worried about. That's why Gavin Newsom had Charlie Kirk on, had the right one, because he wants power. This is not him being
Yeah,
a public servant.
with all everything Trump has tweeted,
Right.
you say you can't, you could not, as a party, elect someone who had a cancel Thanksgiving tweet, perhaps in jet, like you can't, or who said white people made her nervous. Like, and, you could even argue these are dumb tweets, but
Mm-hmm.
like, what has Trump been able to tweet and been able to like? And with Democrats, Mike Johnson would always be like, "Oh, I don't. Is there a device? Is there a social media platform where the president posts things? I didn't see it. I'm very busy." And he's able to kind of do it and move on, and
Mm-hmm.
the media
Yeah.
accepts that. But you're saying that, oh, no, no. Not only could we not get her elected, she's going to cost us race everywhere. Just seems so defeatist to me. And then also the fact that like no one, when Shannon Watts and Neera Tanden were begging Wisconsin voters to choose Crowley because, oh well, again, not an affirmatively pro Crowley argument, just that Francesca Hong will lose, which they stated as a fact.
Mm-hmm.
She will lose because we're not going to help her. This is implicit in that she's going to
Yeah.
lose, and oh no, Farmer Jones will be back, and he's going to be, Tiffany is an election denier, and he was signed on to that suit to try to overturn uh, all Biden's victory. And so that means that if someone wins in 2028, the Democrat, he might not certify that election. It's like, okay, well, how can we as a party lose to that? Can't we argue that like, well, she's not going to cancel Thanksgiving, and if a Republican wins, she's a normal person. She's the normal person. The radical is the one who's going to ignore democracy. And the fact that you
Yeah.
can't make that affirmative argument, like that to me has been like, when everyone talks about the left and socialism and communism, it's like, well, this isn't 1996, right? Like this is like the second Trump term has happened. We
Yeah.
know that a president AOC isn't going to say, if Alabama catches fire, she's not going to say screw them. They didn't
Yes.
vote for me. They're not going to
Yeah.
get any disaster relief, which Trump is doing to blue states. She's
Yeah.
not going to send troops into states to impose her liberal vision. Where like there are citizens who got murdered by ICE, murdered.
Yeah.
The person's still on the streets. There's no trial, and so obviously this is the more radical party, and the party that's just saying that we're going to do, like as I said, I live in Portland. There are certain governance here I'm not crazy about, but it's normal in the sense that I can go and vote them out,
Yeah.
and they're not going to come and no one connected to Tina Kotek's government is going to shoot me or my child. Like, as much as I disagree with what my things that are going to happen, anyone in Oregon knows that she's not going to murder me. So it
Yeah.
just seems like, well, how could we? How are we losing that debate?
I agree. And I will say two things. One about Wisconsin. Um, I don't think Shannon or Neera are from Wisconsin. I don't
No.
believe. So to me, I was kind of like, why are you speaking for Wisconsin voters? Because you don't know if they would have consolidated around Hong if she had won, right? And what I want to say too about Michigan is we saw right away a consolidation around Dr. El Said right away, like within 24 hours. And so this idea, so to me, what they're doing, and I don't want to just point out Shannon and Neera. I'm saying there's a symptom, there's a group of people that are doing this online that are not from that city. They're not from, like, especially a governor's race, right? Where it's like, I'm not going to talk about somebody else's governor like in a negative way because one, other than them having some say over the elections in the state and a little bit of over elections with the Secretary of State for our federal elections, they don't impact me as much as a Senate race. So I can talk about El Said because he'll be one of 100 people that would be dictating laws that would dictate our lives. So to me, I feel like I can have a little bit of opinion, but it's up to the voters there. So to me, I was like, why are they disparaging this person that is the head of that state. It's really up to the voters. And two, yes, I'm tired of the fear mongering around it, because to me, at the end of the day, we should get back to this point where it's like we are going to consolidate around the person that wins the primary. That's
Yeah.
something that we need to re-normalize. Yes, during primaries things get ill. I'm not looking to forward to 2028. I'm looking forward to the fact that Trump will be gone, but no, I'm not looking forward to the
Well,
battling that's going to be happening at that point.
I think they were making Wisconsin issue because of 2028, saying that if Tiffany is and whoever the Democratic nominee is who wins, he'll throw out those results. That's actually not entirely true. Some of the it obviously if Trump or Vance had an election denier in as it would help somewhat, but there are certain limitations, and we've got Mark Elias and a crew if that were
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, like to me, that's not democracy. And I feel like that's as someone who has you've run for office, right? It's
Mhm.
one thing to be the cynicism of being someone who's like, okay, well, I disagree with Maya's views, and we should have this candidate. What I've seen, especially in the past few years, and again, I bring up Shannon and Nira because they're prominent, obviously
Mm.
figures,
Yeah.
but they are saying that your views are fundamentally dangerous, and even not just fundamentally dangerous on ideology, but the swing voters. So
Mhm.
maybe not them, because if you pressed them, they would be like, "Oh, of course I would against the MAGA, I would vote for
Yeah.
Maya," and even though she might believe in prison abolition or this sort of stuff, but it's always these, and this goes back to Joe Biden, and when he was running in 2020 against Joe Biden was saying it was always these sort of usually white, right,
Mhm.
swing voters. Man, they're the ones that we don't know about. They're the ones, and it's sort of this sense of centering these particular in the context of talking about, okay, well, DSA, black voters rejecting it, or rural voters, but ultimately what they're talking about are white suburban swing voters. That's the
Mhm.
ones they're talking about. And that's the ones that say, oh, if they have to choose between Maya and her crazy left wing views or the drooling fascist literal Nazi,
Mhm.
because if people can call El Sayed a communist and he's not even a member of DSA, I think we can fairly call uh, Stephen Miller a Nazi when he's
Yeah.
doing his stuff. Like if you can't beat that, like what are they saying? They're just this. I feel like there's a inherent within the party sense that you know what your views are fundamentally both dangerous and just that are unpopular, even though that's not true.
It's not true, and I think one of the things that people, I know we got to wrap it up, so I'll
Yeah.
say this. I know around the fear mongering has been a lot around DSA because they feel like it's an easy target for them. They're like, if you look at their platform, it's crazy, it's crazy, it's crazy. And I want to say this: there are members of DSA like Mamdani and AOC that say they belong to the New York chapter. They don't say they belong to the national one, and it's because they don't agree with everything on the platform. Well, guess what? I'm a card-carrying Democrat, and I don't agree with everything that's in our platform. And I don't think it's a requirement to. And this is the thing where I get people get frustrated is they think that we have to agree with every single thing that's in like these platforms. I mean, one of the things that people were like, "Isn't this crazy?" They were talking about. We talked about how that one of the DSA's platform planks was they want to see the Senate abolish and to have a more representative House chamber. I'm fine with having a Senate. There's a reason there's a Senate in place. There's a reason why the framers wanted that. And
Mm-hmm.
I hate the story of like, it's supposed to be the cooling chamber where we take this hot, that's such an old played out thing. But at the same time, it is nice to me to have two chambers in case there is dangerous policy that goes through and we're able to kind of block it there. Um, but them saying that they wanting to have one house happens in many democracies across America. Where I get frustrated is that people in the media and pundits are incurious. How about you guys start being curious and you start going, well, why would they want that? Oh, other democracies have that. It's a more representative government. That's interesting. I'm not really agreeing with that. I think we should have two chambers, but I can see why that's something that they want. Oh, and I will say, end with this. Like when Hong was talking about Thanksgiving, I one of the things where I feel like if I could say where she made a mistake is I feel like she wasn't completely media trained.
Mm.
And I don't say that as a knock against her. I'm saying that she wasn't cynically media trained, where I think Dr. El Sayed was. There is a cynic, like when I ran for office, people were so cynical to me. They were so mean to me. They didn't want to hear about any of my policies, even though like a lot of the policies that I ran on are the ones that Mom Donnie won on, by the way. It's just, I'm very happy about it. But I'm saying that there's a cynicism. So with her, the first thing that they didn't ask her about her position to like help fully fund public schools, which to me is so important. Instead, they go, I saw this Thanksgiving tweet you wrote. That was weird. And instead of saying, and so she could have just said, okay, sure, I was a little flippant in that tweet, but let's talk about the fact that our country was built on a genocide that killed millions of indigenous people. And to be clear, indigenous people are still very much alive and participating in our communities across America and Canada and South America. And what I was trying to say is, why are we having a holiday that explicitly whitewashes genocide? So, one. Two, thanks for asking me about that. Speaking of which, I think it is horrific that in our public schools we are not learning about the full history of the United States, and we have divested from public schools so much that we're not. So she wasn't able to like address it and pivot in a way. She was just like, "Oh, that was stupid. Yeah, that was kind of dumb." And because she wasn't ready for this cynicism, the way that media does game framing, they only do us versus. They're always looking for the most controversial thing. I think El Said said it too, because somebody asked about Israel 3 times. They're like, does it have the right to exist? Does it have the right to exist? Does it have the right to exist? It's like, bro, I'm running for Senate in Michigan. Do you want to know what Michiganders care about? Do you have any clue what we're dealing with here? And that to me is CNN. It was a CNN anchor who's being so cynical as to not care. And that's where I know people don't win off of policies. I wish that they did. They win off of like now how well they speak and how well they present themselves, and if there's a little bit of charisma. Um, but it's also the media's fault, because the media has helped push it to that, where they're like, we're not going to ask about your policies. And if somebody comes up with a great policy, the media, the first thing they say, well, how are we going to pay for that? But they don't talk about that we've been spending $1 billion a day on this. I don't want to say war, because we're just bombing Iran, on Iran, and that already could have paid for universal child care for this full year.
Hmm.
That's why I'm saying this is where we are at within our politics. It's cynical, it's patronizing, it's short-sighted. It doesn't actually address what would do well for all of Americans. Like we're in a bad place. I mean, like, you and I are online and we're witnessing people just say horrible, mean things every day. I'm like, why am I online? This is terrible. But I do like having conversations with people, but where we are in politics is in a very bad place. And I think that people need to be more open and more curious to better ideas, to good ideas, and stop thinking of certain things as like universal healthcare is a radical idea. To me, it's like, why would it be radical? Like, let's be honest. Rich people are always going to have their own private physician. They're always going to have their access. No matter if we change this country into one with universal health care, they're going to find a way to like get their own stuff. In the meantime, everybody in the United States would be covered and be able to go to a doctor. So there you go. I'll just
Yeah, and I will wrap this up with just when DSA will go through certain things like abolish the Senate, abolish the Electoral College, and there's a lot of pearl clutching over this. But then Hakeem Jeffries will say, "Oh well, once we flip this, we're going to do. Here's all the things we're going to do," and you're listening to them, knowing Republicans exist, and it's like, well, it sounds like you're going to have to abolish the Senate. Like, how are you going to like? And I think there's only, and we saw this before where Biden said, "You don't need big structural change because I'm in the room, right, with my buddies, and we'll get stuff done." And I feel like that didn't happen, and it won't happen again. And I do think that after a couple times of just being sort of Republicans using this system against any sort of progress, there's going to be a limit to how much people will accept of like, wait a minute, it just seems like you're saying these things and you're not willing to do what is necessary. I might disagree with DSA, but they're at least leading with, they're at least saying, Maya, look, if you want us an extra bet, you're going to have to tear down the house and like, come on, I'm not going to give you, and it's not going to cost $1,000. It's going to redo
Yeah.
your kitchen, and it's not going to be it's not going to be 2 weeks. It's not going to be like Only Murders in the Building, where within 2 days she turned her studio into a beautiful, like, what, how did she do that? Like, no, no, this is reality. So I think I do think that type of cynicism is eventually going to end out. But thank you so much for spending some time chatting with me for part 2 of our discussion. Where can folks find you if they want to learn more or chat
Mostly on
more with
social
you?
media. My book comes out in April of next year called The Language of Theft. I'm excited for people to angrily disagree with me.
Yes. Well, definitely, we'll probably have you on before that, but we'll definitely have you on to discuss your book. And thank you again, Maya. Like, share, subscribe. Catch you guys next time. Take care.